Hi, I apologise for the Gills in the room. Thank you for having me, and it's really great to be here, and it's so nice to see some old mates and meet some new friends. And I can't believe it was about 2.5 years ago that Carlina first asked me to do this gig, and so much has changed since then. But I'm still banging on about creativity, and I think it's very important in a conference like this to talk about creativity in the content of our events. Insurance is important, finance is incredibly important, risk is important, all of the disaster stories are important, but I think, you know, going back to the source of creativity and the sort of audience experience we provide is crucial to the development of our events and our industry. So off we go. I've got like a bazillion photos to keep you entertained. I know some of you are looking at me and seeing like a chicken sandwich or something because I'm just before lunch. So I'll try and make it as entertaining as I possibly can and hopefully have some questions at the end. So I see events and the ignition of events and creativity as a little bit like fire. You know, if you tend fire, if you rearrange a fire, if you give it some TLC, you know, it's very comforting, it brings people together, it warms us, it entertains us even. If you don't, if you leave it alone, it'll either fizzle out or it'll burn out of control. And I think creativity, that analogy around creativity events is a similar thing. It does bring us together, events bring us together. And I think that's a fundamental thing. You know, it was spoken about yesterday about that innate sense of us coming together through events. It's all about that audience experience that we share together. And fire, like creativity, works across a whole range of cultural experiences. From First Nation to every culture in the world, we all have stories to tell. We all have a narrative that will bring us together. So why is it me that's standing here talking about creativity and banging on about my pet subject and my passion and not somebody else? Well, as you heard in the introduction, 18 months ago, I was awarded the job as Festival Director of Vivid Sydney. Last year, I did 2 cancellations, and 2 postponements and a cancellation of Vivid. This year, we finally got the show on the road, and I'm happy to say it was the most successful Vivid in its history, with 2.58 million people on the Light Walk. Bunch of other statistics, but it is Australia's biggest event and one of the biggest events in the world. And the reason I'm kind of talking about my background a little bit is because all of these events, no matter how big or how small, fundamentally have the same sort of components when it comes to creativity. I was also lucky enough to be awarded the job as Creative Director of the opening of Barangaroo Reserve and the Cutaway, which is an amazing venue in Sydney. I was the Creative Director of the Rugby League World Cup opening ceremony at Amy Stadium in Melbourne. Firelight Festival also in Melbourne that sort of revolutionised the Docklands. People finally came, worked on that for 5 years. Was the creative director and producer of Winter Feast, which is a massive food event, the centrepiece of Dark Mofo, so for the first 3 years of that. As artistic associate for the Adelaide Festival with under Neil Armfield and Rachel Healy, and instigated and developed the Riverbank Palais, which is a purpose-built floating venue on the Torrens in the middle of Adelaide for 3 years. Lots of public art curation for Transport for New South Wales and local government. I directed the Newtown Festival, a community event, biggest community music event in the country, and for 15 years was the creative director and producer of events for the City of Sydney that included things like the Lunar New Year celebrations, largest celebrations of the Lunar New Year outside of mainland China, Art and About Sydney, a public art festival, and a range of other stuff. And as I said, all of those events have something in common, and that is creativity, and the sense that they are all events that were sort of instigated to solve a problem. Whether it's Vivid Sydney, and initially was instigated and still is, to solve the problem of low economic impact in the city during the winter months, or whether it's the Lunar New Year, or whether it's the Newtown Festival, all really, and when you think about it, probably your events too, a lot of them are about problem solving. And nothing I tell you today is going to be rocket science, but hopefully it's going to be like a half an hour sojourn into creativity and a little bit of a refresher course about why we do what we do and maybe some new ways of thinking about it. How many people feel like this? If you can't read it, it says, get back to that goddamn cubicle and start thinking outside the box. How many of us have ideas when we're sitting in our cubicle between 9 and 5? Not many. Creativity is something that happens outside of the cubicle. And today I want to spend a little bit of time just looking at how we access our creativity. Because a lot of people sort of think about creative people as being, you know, oh, that's something they do. I'm not creative. I fundamentally believe everyone is creative and everyone has good ideas. So I love this quote about creative people are those who come up with more ideas in a shorter space of time. They have more good ideas, but they also have bad ideas as well. And I think sometimes we, you know, censor ourselves before we even let an idea come out. And some of the best ideas I've had have been really, you know, started at a pretty crappy place. So I think the key is generating ideas quickly. I really agree with this quote and how we can do that. Again, not rocket science, but let's think about how we access our creativity. I fundamentally believe we need to give ourselves a little bit more time to think. I am the worst offender with the phone in my hand all the time, but sometimes just putting that down for a while, and if you catch public transport, here's a tip. Try and put it down when you're on public transport. Let yourself gaze out of the window. The opportunity to be bored or to let your mind wander suddenly allows you to have ideas. So I think just making some space for creativity is the number one thing. None of the others are, you know, revolutionary. We all know about brainstorming, but when was the last time you spent some decent time with your team and brainstormed an idea? Maybe time to revisit it. Question everything. Why do we do it like that? Do we need to do it again like that? Can we do it differently? Refreshing events, involving people that aren't part of the industry. I've found this particularly interesting, like getting feedback from people that don't work in the industry. Sometimes you don't like it, but it's really important to understand how, you know, people outside of our sphere feel about the experience that you've just presented them. And exposing yourself. Now, I don't mean standing up and taking off your clothes, but you can if you want to. Exposing yourself to new experiences and things that are outside of your sphere. I am not a rugby league fan, but somehow I ended up directing an opening ceremony for the Rugby League World Cup. So I had to, you know, go and see lots of rugby league games and all the rest of it, and exposing myself to that sort of, you know, experience outside of my sphere made me better at directing that event. We've just been hearing about thinking outside the box. It's often a term that's used, and I think it often overwhelms people because a lot of people in the creativity space think thinking outside the box means having an original idea. And I guarantee probably if all of us had original ideas, a lot of us wouldn't be sitting here right now. But when you think about your box or your event as a box, some original ideas outside of what you're already doing are very achievable. Know what I mean? It doesn't have to change the world. It doesn't have to be a revolutionary new idea for events all over the world. But it can be some small things that really change the audience experience outside what you normally do in your event. Which leads us to this. Often creativity is simply making new things out of old ones, not changing the world. This is a great example of it. For Vivid Sydney this year, we extended the light walk down to the goods line in Sydney, and there's a tunnel at the end of the goods line. That tunnel is the oldest above ground tunnel in Sydney and hadn't been open to the public since the 1980s. We got a submission from the fabulous Mandy Lights about building a tunnel and putting this laser show in it. When I was walking down the goods line and suddenly saw at the end of there, it dawned on me, we need to put this work into that tunnel. Not revolutionary, but making a new thing out of an old thing, and it was one of the most successful installations we had in Vivid this year because it was kind of introducing people to an old venue and something that they didn't know that was there before with new technology. Well, not that new. Laser's been around since I was on dance floors, but anyway, that's another story. So when do I feel creative? That's the other thing I wanted to talk to you about. When do you give yourself time to feel creative? Or if you want to swap out the creative word, when do we give ourselves time to have new ideas? Sometimes that's a little bit easier for people to kind of think about creativity in that guise, about having new ideas. I do workshops in creativity with people. This is condensed into 20, 25 minutes, but we often spend quite a lot of time on this and I really ask people to think about when they have ideas. Anyone want to throw out what you think the top 3 answers might be? Shower, yes. The car, driving, yes. Toilet, not so much, but I'll pay that one. In the morning, yeah, a lot of people say just before they sort of are conscious of waking up. Cooking's another one, gardening's another one, walking's another one. What do all those things have in common? Yeah, no phones and no cubicles involved. You're not sitting in your cubicle being paid to be creative. These are when ideas pop into people's minds. So if you're aware of when you have more ideas, then you can sort of make more time to have ideas, right? So creativity in events, again, not rocket science, but I like to think of it as all the words. Refreshing, renewing, reinventing, regenerating, redoing. Risking is a really important one. Taking risks. They might only be tiny risks, but they can make a huge difference to your event. And reigniting, which is what we're talking about today. But fundamentally, it's all about the story and the way it makes you feel. It's all about the audience and the journey that we take them on. Now, I know journey is the most overused, apart from immersion, the most overused word in our industry probably. But fundamentally, it's all about the narrative and the way we make people feel. This is part of a narrative for Vivid Sydney this year. Vivid never had a theme before, and it was something I brought in to refresh the event. And this year the theme was the soul of Sydney, which was all about bringing people back, bringing Sydneysiders back to the event. A lot of people, myself included, had stopped going to Vivid. We thought, we'd seen it, we'd done it, it was too busy, too hard. So how can we bring people back to the event? How can we reconnect the city with this incredible event? Because Vivid is so powerful because of the canvas that it's produced in. So in talking about the soul of the city, we were not only talking about our people and our geography and our place, we were also talking about our creatures. And this was a beautiful work by Layla Jeffries. If you're a bird nerd like me, or even if you love photography, look up Layla Jeffries, an exquisite photographer. And we brought her work outside into this triptych projection, and it helped tell that story. It helped take people on that narrative. Firelight in Melbourne, again about the winter solstice. We worked with Forge Foti, the fabulous Fotis, to create these fire sculptures that talked, about symbols of the solstice. This is one of my favourite events that I've ever directed, was for the City of Sydney. It was called Primo Italiano, celebrating the first Italian community in Sydney, in Stanley Street. And we'd done it for a few years and done the same old bands with, Italian bands and DJs and all the rest of it. And then it struck me that, being half Italian, what are we really good at? We're really good at putting on weddings. So I used a wedding as the whole premise for the entertainment for the whole day, for the next year that we did Primo Italiano. Incredibly successful because everyone can relate, right? It's a narrative. We took the audience on the journey from the proposal, to the Bucks night, to the wedding itself, to the reception, which this was, and on it goes. Barangaroo Reserve, 3 months of events that I was doing for the opening of that. So I broke it into 3 parts. The first month being Stone, which was about the First Nations history and narrative of that place, which is very significant. The second month being Sea, about the maritime history. The third month being Sky, about the future. This was for Stone, the incredible Brooke Andrews, the first commissioned artwork for the Cutaway, and really helped cement that First Nations story and narrative within the space. Design is another really important part of creativity, and it's if you're not working with a designer or you can't afford it or whatever, I would try and get a secondment or a student or somebody to work with you. It's probably the most important relationship I have in terms of directing events, because you can have the best idea under the sun, but if you can't sort of illustrate it or make a picture of it, then it just remains an idea. And that sense of integration of design, of all the aspects of design coming together so that it's a really holistic experience. And this is just a few examples. This was the first year we did Winter Feast for Dark Mofo, and we really wanted to change the experience of how people sort of experience the Princess Wharf a venue there. And so we created, out of a gobo and a few paper bags and candles, so it wasn't an expensive idea, this labyrinth, which really changed the way that people viewed the entrance to the event. You know, the connection of a site through lighting. This is Firelight at Docklands. The whole idea of doing, you know, design that's large scale and niche at the same time. This is the second month of the Cutaway for Barangaroo, a work by SM Projects that had that niche experiences in those shipping containers, because the theme was around the maritime history of the site, and also projection on the wall. So you could get that massive experience, but then you could go into the shipping containers and get a much more personalised, smaller experience, you know. And I love those experiences that maybe only a quarter of your audience might see or experience, and then they tell other people, and so that brings people back to the event, or, you know, makes them explore even further. So having those range of experiences, that depth of experience. Also, you know, again, not rocket science, but around unifying themes, about logos, symbols, colours, the senses, you know, involving all of those things to really give, here's that word again, an immersive experience. Because it's when you produce that sort of 360-degree experience that people are really immersed in it. And it's quite easy to do when you think about it from a sensual sort of perspective. Obviously, this is a great big logo in the sky, but this is the drone show that we did this year for Vivid Sydney with Paramount Plus. To date, I think the largest drone show in Australia, but I'm sure that will be pipped at the post within minutes. But Paramount came to us. The show was very much about, you know, their product. Fabulous show, but we worked out that, you know, really it needed a Vivid Sydney logo. It's suddenly then cemented this show, which has been seen by literally millions and millions of people around the world, as a Vivid Sydney event in Sydney Cove. Again, that niche and mass idea. This is a project by the Glue Society for the third month of Barangaroo Reserve that gives that sort of range of experiences, really up close and personal, chalkboards to a massive installation. And again, on a much simpler level, that Italian event, Primo Italiano, looking at senses. You know, we brought a fountain into Stanley Street each year that we did this event, and each year we decorated it differently. This year, obviously, with Italian, fruit and veg, and, you know, looking at popular Italian words and stringing them across the street. Really simple stuff, but gives a whole nother perspective to the audience experience. And this one, Winter Feast for Dark Mofo, I worked with the Mona team about building purpose-built barbecue for this event. We ended up selling a ton of meat in the third year that we did the Winter Feast. But this gave a whole nother perspective to the event. You could smell it, you could see it. This is Alex Herbert, a fabulous chef. You could go up and talk to the chef while they were cooking it. So it became this sort of whole immersion in barbecue. I've since become a vegetarian. And that's true. So, you know, it's all about how we make people feel. The audience may forget what you say, but they'll never forget how they make you feel. And one event that always does that for me is I directed Martin Place Christmas concert for 15 years for the City of Sydney. No matter how many times we did it, how many of us remember, going to see Santa with our parents? Probably most of the room, right? So really understanding the gravity of producing those memories. I believe we're in the business of making memories for people. And the Martin Place Christmas concert just reminded me year after year after year. And even the most hardened event people would have tears running down their faces. They saw kids' faces light up when Santa kind of arrived at the site. So, of course, then there's programming. We've got design, then we can talk a little bit about programming. And as I said, this is like, a very, very quick skim over some of the elements that make our events more creative. But programming, of course, is about creative content. And it's the way that we can control our audience, if that's a word you're comfortable with, or connect with our audience, and, of course, entertain them. That can consist of a whole range of things, that niche and mass experience, as I said before, that immersive experience, that sense of, creating moments. And of course, one size doesn't fit all. There are no rules, but we can't look at events as just a cookie cutter experience. And I'm sure all of us have been to those events where you think this is exactly the same last year as it was the year before, or as it was the year before. Or they're just using the same entertainment, they used at the Christmas concert that they're using for Australia Day or whatever. Like, we really have to throw everything up in the air and look at being purpose-built, fit for purpose for the event that we're doing. The reason I've got get out up there is get out and see things. Get out and see things outside of your comfort zone. Go to things that you wouldn't normally go to, because there you're going to see amazing designers or suppliers or DJs or musicians or whatever. It's really important to remind ourselves, and I know, it's hard sometimes to drag yourself off the couch on a Friday or Saturday night and go to an event, but it really helps develop the creativity and the content of your event. And there's so many ways that we can do things, so many ways we can do music. This is Tumbalong Park stage for Vivid Sydney. This is roving music at Firelight. DJs, the fabulous Pee Wee Ferris, and Ben Walsh, an amazing drummer, who did an installation for us for Out and About in Martin Place. Just like 4 examples of how you can do music. So many ideas there. And again, so many ways that you can do talking heads. This is Baz Luhrmann at Vivid Sydney this year. And we did the talking head thing, we did in conversation with Baz, but then we premiered Elvis the movie, which kind of gave this whole other experience to our ideas program. And of course, the fabulous Oracle Liquid, who is sitting right down here for me. It's worked with us on Firelight, worked with us on Vivid Sydney this year as well, but in response to a winter solstice theme, created, the sun out of water at Firelight. So many ways you can do so many things. I don't need to tell you how many, different permutations there are for programming. This is Art and About, an exhibition, a photographic exhibition we used to do in Hyde Park. Another way of, taking a gallery outside and making it more accessible to more people. And of course, back to the Primo example, the wedding. And this couple, they're actors that I know actually ended up getting married on the day. They said, do you mind if we really bring a celebrant in and get married? I said, sure. So they did, and there wasn't a dry eye on Stanley Street. The City of Sydney's Chinese New Year celebrations, now Lunar New Year celebrations, I used to direct the parade for them. Every year it's a different animal. So we would look at how we could use that animal as a connecting point between Eastern and Western culture. Year of the Horse, Year of the Snake. So many ways we could, communicate with a broad range of audiences. And food, of course, an amazing way of creating experiences, of connecting with the senses and really giving audiences more than they bargained for. Just very quickly touching on budgets, because a lot of people say to me, oh yeah, but it's all right for you, you're working with these massive budgets. It's really the same. We all know it's really the same sort of tensions if you've got $20 million or $2,000. The same sort of rules apply. And I fundamentally believe that a lot of the decisions we make in terms of creative decisions can cost the same. A bad creative decision can cost the same as a good one. Creativity can be free. Some of the things you just change up, you're still spending the same amount of money. I think is the mic still working? Yeah, still spending the same amount of money, but providing a much deeper and much more enjoyable experience. And looking at sustainability, looking at investment. This idea, Lolo Lavina's Caravan, was cheaper than having a stage, and yet brought a whole nother dimension to the Firelight Festival in Melbourne, and a much cheaper option. This sculpture for Art and About Sydney, a penny farthing made out of recycled bikes. Incredibly cheap materials and, obviously sustainable, but, a much cheaper option than kind of getting new bikes and making that sculpture. And this, by the Incredible Earth, I commissioned them to do a puppet for the Year of the Tiger, and the next year, it became the Year of the Rabbit. So, what was an expensive exercise in one year became a much more affordable option by using it in 2. And just very quickly about marketing, because I think marketing is fundamentally a very important part of the creative process. We need to be able to communicate to our audiences before they get to the event the kind of experience that they're going to have. And it needs to be integrated and it needs to be holistic. And this is so important. Here's just some, just one idea around Firelight in terms of how we sold that event. Everywhere you looked at, it was consistent, it was exciting, it kind of obviously had fire in it, and you could see the real thing at the event. So it immediately gave you a sense of what you were going to get at the event. There are thousands of examples, but I think so often the marketing team will go in one direction and the creative team will go in the other. And when we work together, we can really produce amazing things and give our audiences a sense of what they're up for. So I'm no Confucius, but I, will read you this quote. Tell me and I forget, show me and I remember, involve me and I understand. Whether it's a very simple idea, this is one of the first projection projects I did about 20 years ago, look how kind of tinny it is compared with what we do today. But this was working with the Millers Point community in Sydney and bringing out their home photos and their home videos and projecting them on walls around Sydney when that whole area was becoming gentrified. You know, here's the reception at Primo Italiano, Involve Me. You know, people were there like they felt like they were at a real wedding. There were people crying and, you know, they didn't even know the couple. It was amazing. Love was in the air. The incredible Craig Walsh projecting on trees in Hyde Park as part of Art and About, projecting the images of very famous protesters that had protested in Hyde Park, and that really resonated with a lot of Sydney-siders. And going back to where we sort of began, that whatever creativity is, it is part of a solution to a problem. But first of all, we need to identify what that problem is. And one of the biggest problems I have is this. When people say to me, but we've always done it that way and it worked and people really liked it, they'll come back. Well, I think people are much more discerning now than they ever have been. There's so much more on offer that we have to make sure that we throw everything up in the air, even if it's an annual event that we do year in, year out. Throw everything up in the air and see where it lands. If we land in the same space that we started in, fine, but at least we've interrogated why we're doing it. So there's lots of different ways of doing things. This is, you know, Fodi's at Firelight. This is, you know, this event was a dream come true for me, to be asked by Mona to develop a new food experience for Dark Mofo, and really the rope was very long. I could do whatever I wanted to, but it kind of revolutionised food events for me and certainly for the audience in Hobart, by really kind of thinking about that audience experience and that narrative of the winter solstice. And Lunar New Year, by putting this installation, the Terracotta Warriors installation at, in Sydney Cove with that backdrop, suddenly this photograph went all the way around the world on newspapers all the way around the world. So context is everything. And going back to where we began, that idea about fire. Tending that fire, looking after that fire, creating small moments, large moments, but making sure that we give it lots of TLC, lots of tender love and care. And if we give that to the creativity in our events, I guarantee you your audience will love you back. So, as I said at the beginning, it's not rocket science, but really the sky is the limit in terms of developing creativity for your events. I hope this has been useful. I hope it's given you half an hour out of the more practical kind of elements of event production and delivery. And I hope, we have a conversation outside about creativity, and good luck. Really great to be here. Thank you. Sure, if anyone's got a question, more than happy, or if you want to run out and get lunch, I totally understand.
You're so accomplished and you've worked on half of the events that I've gone to. Kudos to you. It's incredible. Dark Mofo, the Newtown Festival, Vivid, incredible. What's left for you career-wise? I know you're working one of the best jobs in the world ever with Vivid, but where do you go from here? Have you got aspirations further?
To my beach house in Culburra Beach. Look, I feel like I've only just begun at Vivid. Wow. So, and it's a massive event. I was saying to people last night, it kind of makes everything else I've done feel like putting on my birthday party. It is so vast, and I kind of knew it was a big event, but I never really kind of clocked, how big it is. And we've done a lot, the team and I, to try and change Vivid and re-energise Vivid. And, these are lessons that we use every day. So I think getting that right is probably front of mind. And I don't know, I really like doing small things too. So yeah, let me get back to you in a couple of years.
Second part of that question is, I know that you're working at all these events, so it's really difficult, and a lot of people will feel the same way. When you're working in the events, it's hard to take them in because you're just thinking about the next thing. But have you had a moment in your career where you've gone, oh my God, I really feel this is like, is there a highlight moment working on all these festivals?
Winter Feast was, yeah, because people said to us, it was like a dream job really, because Mona engaged me a year before Dark Mofo, And so we had a year to kind of really develop ideas and really think through what we wanted to do. And I come from a hospitality background. My parents are publicans. My brother's, a chef, restaurateur, kind of explains a lot, really. And I really wanted to do food differently. And I was given a very long rope, as I said. But there were a lot of naysayers. People were going, no one's going to come to an event in the middle of winter in Hobart. My whole family live in Hobart. I'm not from Tasmania. I'm South Australian originally. But I know Hobart well. And people were going, no one's going to come. It's freezing. And it really is freezing. And half the event was outside and stuff like that. And we were so nervous about anyone turning up that I was hiding behind the curtain, like peering out. And I said, there's a queue. Like, this was the first year. I went, there's a queue. And the queue went all the way down sort of Salamanca Place. And that moment, and watching people come into that environment and gasping because... Brad Clark, amazing designer, designed that for me, and just that whole transformative experience I'll never forget it. But I'm a softie. I get tears in my eyes a lot. I was wandering around Vivid crying. You probably saw me, some of you, but yeah, I get quite overwhelmed quite a lot. I think that's part of it. I think you have to love it,
Oh, well, you certainly brought that across today. Thank you so much for your time.
That's my pleasure.
Gill.
Thank you, everyone.